Okay, so now that we're done looking through Thompson's view on abortion, we're going to look at an alternative view here. And this comes to us through Peter Singer. Singer is one of the sort of most famous living philosophers. He currently works out of Princeton University, mostly in bioethics, but he's written books that have influenced people to take up the animal welfare cause. He's a big supporter of international charity, helping the world's poor. And he gets there to all of these different views because he's a preference utilitarian. So remember, we talked about Bentham and Mill. They're also utilitarians, but they're not preference utilitarians. Um, Bentham and Mill thought that we maximized utility by just producing pleasure in the world. But Singer thinks utilitarians should think a little bit differently. Instead of trying to maximize pleasure, what we need to do is satisfy people's preferences. So, for example, if you prefer chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream, well, then the utilitarian thing to do would be to eat the chocolate ice cream. It would be satisfying your preference, and therefore it would bring more utility into the world than the other option. Right, so that's how he gets to animal welfare cases. That's how he gets to helping the world's poor. Right, he thinks that it would be satisfying these preferences of all these different people. So in order to settle the abortion debate, all we need to do is just simply apply this same type of utilitarian thinking. Right? In regard to the abortion debate, what are the preferences at issue, and how do we satisfy them? And we're just going to go through this very quickly just so you can see what an alternative to Thompson's view is. But Singer claims that there's nothing wrong with an abortion at any stage of the pregnancy. At least nothing wrong with abortion in and of itself. And that's because fetuses just aren't the type of things that even have preferences. Right? He says fetuses do not yet have any preferences, and if something lacks preferences, then it can't be calculated into the utilitarian calculus. So the preferences that fetuses might have aren't enough. It can't be just something could have these preferences. It has to be the actual preferences of a being. And since fetuses are beings that lack preferences, we just don't have to count them in part of our calculations. So the fetus itself can have no effect on utility. And so since abortion would satisfy the preferences of the mother, obviously, because they're seeking an abortion, it's morally permissible. Right, so at least in this case, the way Singer's described it, we have two things, two beings, the fetus and the mother, and we have to see which preferences would be satisfied by allowing an abortion. The fetus doesn't have any, the mother does, so we go with what the mother wants. So that's a very simple view of how Singer views the abortion debate, right? It's just a matter of calculating preferences, and fetuses don't have preferences. However, there we go. However, this is too simplistic, right? And hopefully you were thinking this already. There's more at stake. There are more people involved than just the mother and the fetus, right? We can't just worry about the preferences of those two. Singer agrees with this. Right? Singer, as a preference utilitarian, has to look at the preferences of everyone affected by the action. So, in addition to the mother and the fetus, we have to see, on a case-by-case basis, who's being affected and whether or not the action satisfies their preferences. And then we just do whatever actually satisfies preferences. Right? So in the real world, we'll have to go on a case-to-case basis, and we'll have to see if abortion is permissible in each of those cases. And Singer is going to say we can't sort of do this from the armchair. We can't do this from behind our computer, right? We can't guess at what abortion will be like in each case. We'll literally have to get down into the details, find the people who were affected, and see what their preferences are. And then we can determine, once we have all of that information, whether or not abortion in that case will satisfy enough of the preferences, will maximize preference satisfaction. However, Singer will claim his major point still stands, right? If we were in the ideal scenario where the only two people who were affected were the fetus and the mother, then there's nothing actually wrong with abortion. Right? He's going to say this regardless. Real world, ideal world. There's nothing actually wrong with abortion in and of itself. Abortion is a simple case of a mother and a fetus and Abortion always will satisfy the mother's preferences, and there's no other preferences to worry about. Now, in the real world, obviously, the calculations will be far more complicated and things get muddied up a little. But that's not because abortion is somehow just wrong in and of itself. It's wrong because of the consequences it has for everybody's preferences. So that's what's important for Singer, right? Abortion is not inherently evil. It's only evil in certain cases where it violates people's preferences. So this has led Singer to hold some pretty extreme views about abortion, and that's why many people protested when he took his job at Princeton. Because he's going to say, essentially, all abortions, very early in the pregnancy or like on the very few last days of the pregnancy, are all permissible because this fetus just isn't something that can have preferences. Okay, so that's it for Singer. Like I said, just sort of a quick view of an alternative view to Thompson, a more extreme view. But really, it's only extreme in theory. Like I said, in practice, you're going to be looking at a case by case basis. It's not just going to say, oh, yeah, all abortions are allowed. You have to really dig into the details there. Yeah, but that's it for Singer this week. And next, we'll look at the constitutional law regarding abortion in the U.S. Thank you.